Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back once again to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Tom, Francis, it is delightful to see you on this wonderful summer's day. I think the first summer's day we've actually had in ages. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. We're happy to be back. We were missing you last week, so we're hoping for some more continuity, get you back, and more professionalism for sure this week.
I'm sure you guys were absolutely fine without me, but Francis, how are you?
It definitely feels like there's a little bit more stability when we have you starting off the podcast as opposed to me. I feel like we have a bit more order, know what we're doing.
Everyone just misses the hellos, that's all it is.
It's iconic.
It felt wrong doing a hello without you here.
Amazing. Well, we've got plenty of fantastic fintech news to talk about today. Tom, what article have you brought?
So this week I'm going to be talking about the FCA, which has warned consumers about loan fee fraud risks as more consumers turn to loans to cover their summer spending.
Lovely stuff. And Francis, what have you brought today?
So today I'm going to be talking about overseas payment fees for SMEs.
Amazing. And then my article today is about email phishing and how it is a security risk in workplaces. Does anyone want to go first this week? Anyone got a burning desire to start talking about their topic?
I think you should go first, Polly, after a nice welcome back.
You know what? I will go first. I never go first, so this is appropriate. So basically, email phishing has caused problems for individuals and businesses for a very, very long time now. But I guess the problem that we have when it comes to phishing is that as cybersecurity methods and sort of defenses against phishing get better, so do the fraudsters and the people who are doing the phishing. So know before, the security awareness training and simulated phishing platform provider has revealed that the top email subjects clicked on in its latest phishing test report and has found that nearly 1 in 3 users are likely to click on a suspicious link or comply with a fraudulent request via email. So I wanted to talk about this one today because I literally had a conversation with my mother this morning about how she'd gotten like a phishing text. It was one of those ones that was like, "Hey mum, this is my new number, save it please and message me back." And she was going to reply to it because she was like that she saw no reason to be suspicious. And to be fair, it was a really good one because like it didn't look untoward at all. And so we had to have this conversation about like, no, don't do that because that was a scam and they probably would have like asked you for money or like send you a dodgy link or something later on. So that's why I want to talk about this today because I'm like, it's so prevalent. Like phishing is such a big thing. And I think especially in workplaces and to like workplace emails, I've noticed it a lot. Like a lot of people, I know like quite a few of my friends like sort of tell me about like dodgy emails they get. Saying, oh, buy a bunch of gift cards and send the pictures over or things like that. So I thought it would be a really interesting one to talk about today because, like I say, phishing is quite a prevalent thing amongst consumers. KnowBe4 found that phishing emails continue to be one of the most common methods for malicious attacks on organizations worldwide. And cybercriminals are constantly refining their strategies to stay up to date within the market trends and outsmart end users and organizations by creating phishing email subjects that are realistic and believable. So, fraudsters often like prey on emotions, aim to cause distress, confusion, panic, or even excitement in order to entice someone to click on a phishing link or malicious attachment. And this was, with my mother, like they posed as her daughter and that worked for her basically. So I just thought it would be really interesting to talk about today. I guess first of all, have you guys ever had any like phishing emails or like phishing texts, any kind of scams like that, whether that's to your like work email or not, or to your personal email? And also kind of what do you think about this? I feel like phishing is just one of those things that just happens and you kind of have to be smart and wise up to it. But it's actually getting quite difficult because they're very, very believable. And the amount of times you'll get an email that looks so legit, but actually isn't, it's really quite difficult to tell now, I think, between safe emails and phishing emails. But what do you guys think, Francis?
I think it's concerning how often we're seeing these types of scams now. I know for a fact that one of my friends, I remember he got a new job somewhere, and he was working with another one of our friends, and the third friend told me that the new guy had fallen for one of those scams where you get an email to your account, and you have to actually look at the email address to see if it's the correct one, because it has your employer's name as the name. I don't know how they get it, or if they just have it in some common place, or what it is. But they say, "Oh, can you send me your WhatsApp number?" Because then obviously they try to impersonate your employer and sort of tell you, "Oh, something like, your payment hasn't gone through, or we can't pay you, please give us your details," that sort of stuff. And luckily my friend was able to realize it wasn't the real person. But I mean, it's so easy if you're not really paying attention, if you're not checking the actual email, address. It has your employer's name on it, and if you're in a rush, or if you're not fully with it in the morning, something like that, it's very easy to make that mistake. And in a similar way to you, that you were talking about your mum almost falling for the scam, my parents have had it as well, and they once had it when I was in the room with them, and it was like, "Hi, mum, I've lost my I've lost my phone, and I'm stuck somewhere." And my parents looked up at me and they were like, "You didn't send this, did you?" And I was like, "I'm right here. How could I have done?" And I think it's worrying how good some of these impersonators can be. I think you really do need to be on your toes and sort of really switched on, because otherwise, I mean, you don't, the stereotype of they target, the elderly and stuff like that. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they will target anyone. And I know we've done reports which show that the elderly, it's sort of a general misconception that the elderly are more vulnerable, but I think it really is true, because I mean, just look at the examples that we've listed off, right? And so I think it's definitely an interesting space, and this is why people need to be more aware and really switched on to the types of attacks that there are nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you've said. And I think it's just one of those really tricky things where you do have to be like really hyper aware. But then I think that sometimes you can be almost too aware. Like the amount of emails I get when I'm like, that's got to be a scam. Like that just looks a bit dodgy. And then actually, no, it's not a scam. It's something that I did need to do. It happens quite a lot, like emails from the council or whatever. So it can be a bit tricky, but it's a really hard thing to navigate, I think. I mean, Tom, what do you think? Have you ever seen any sort of scams or phishing things happen in your life?
I've started to wonder recently if my number's in like a scammers database or something, because the amount I get, I mean, I see so many different approaches, like WhatsApp, emails, just normal messages. Got so many, but I think the thing that I've noticed from receiving them, like I feel like I'm quite good at recognizing them straight away. I mean, I've had ones like you guys said from my children who don't exist. That's quite an easy way to spot them. But there's so many different kind of ways they can try and trick you. Like this article is all about organizations. They're posing as like HR to trick employees. I had one where someone pretended to like message me thinking I was someone else. So they said like, "Hi, Sandra," and when I like messaged back like, "Oh, you've got the wrong number," then they like tried to strike up a conversation with me, and it's like crazy how persistent. They like message me every day, like, "Hi, how are you doing? Like, just wanted to see what you're up to today," and then they'll try to build a relationship up with you. And I just used to reply out of more like wondering how they're going to try and scam me. And eventually, like after weeks, they were like, "Oh, I've got this crypto thing where we can make loads of money together." And that they like were so persistent. They were messaging me for weeks in the hope to try and strike up a relationship. And ultimately, all they're trying to do is get you to send them crypto or bank details or whatever. But I think it's so hard to maybe recognize it every time, because something that starts out as, "Oh, it's just someone's mistakenly messaged me," there can't be a scam behind that. They like transition it even really slowly, and they're willing to put time and effort into messaging you over a long period of time. So I think it's really important to be aware of these types of scams, because they will literally try any angle. And I feel like I've seen most of them to my inbox. They'll try any angle they think might be able to trick you. Some even the most like out there examples like that. So I think it's important just to stay aware and basically not send your money to anything that isn't registered, and make sure it's protected beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that because I did get a wrong number text this morning. So now I'm worried that I'm going to be going in on a crypto scam. I'll let you know how that goes,
Keep us
that plays
updated.
out. Yeah, that would be really funny if that was the case.
No, I was just gonna say, before we change article, it's just reminded me. Tom and I actually had a conversation earlier about the use of PayPal, because I don't actually use PayPal, and I know that half the time I get sort of messages saying, "Oh, your PayPal account, the payment didn't go through," And it's something that, because these sort of scams are so common, like with these financial apps, it makes me not want to get them, just because I know in myself that I haven't made a payment, and even if it is from, say, my bank account, and it's saying, oh, this hasn't gone through, I know that I haven't done it, so I know it's fake. But nonetheless, it always instills you with some doubt and a little bit of fear, and that, I think that's the problem, really. And I think that's why organizations really need to sort of stress how they're reassuring customers that they don't need to be afraid of falling for something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely agree. Anyway, let's move on. Tom, why don't you go next? Because yours also is about fraud, kind of.
It is. We've got a fraud special this week. But yeah, so as I said at the start, mine's all about the FCA has launched a campaign to help UK consumers spot and avoid loan fee fraud. And basically, the regulator revealed that 55% of UK adults are currently more worried about their finances this summer than they were like in the summer last year. And the campaign basically explains that because people across the UK are struggling with what feels like a sort of ever increasing cost of living at the moment, way more people are turning to loans to make sure they've got enough money for the summer period. And that means that more people are susceptible to loan fee fraud. And basically, what that is when a consumer pays a loan, they pay a fee for a loan, sorry, that they never actually receive. And the FCA says that this typically results in about a £260 loss on average. So, with the pressures of summer costs worrying consumers, around 18% have dipped into their savings, while 12% have turned to credit cards. And overall, about 24% of all consumers in the UK are turning to credit cards or credit solutions or loans to fund additional summer related activity. And this is just making people really susceptible to this loan fee fraud. And to tackle scam efforts, the FCA is basically urging people to take a 3-step check into consideration. So this is if you're cold called or emailed, it's most likely a scam. If you're asked to pay an upfront fee, it could be a scam. And if you're asked to pay quickly or unusually, it could also be a scam. And it's basically saying that if you ever need to apply for a loan, you should be checking the FCA register first and foremost to see if the firm you're dealing with is legitimate before you hand over any of your details and payment. So I thought this was just an interesting topic because, again, it's just about making sure that people are educated in these types of areas. There's so many different types of frauds and scams going about. We've spoken about phishing. This is to do with loan fee fraud, trying to prey on people who are worried about their finances, during the cost of living crisis. That's most people nowadays. And I think that's really interesting because everyone's being targeted by some type of scam. And in day-to-day life, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people that aren't in some way targeted by these fraudsters. So I guess I just wanted to get your guys' views on the outlook of what this means and how people can really make sure, like the last topic, that they're staying safe. Francis, I'll come to you first.
It's an interesting step to be brought up by the FCA, in the idea that they have everything on their website. They have all the licensed lenders. And I was just thinking to myself as you were talking then that if I was to apply for a loan today, I wouldn't have thought twice about checking to see if they were legit or anything like that. I would have just, you look at the site and you think to yourself, this probably looks about right. I think this is probably what a lender would look like, and probably go from there. Maybe do a bit more research than that. But I think the point of what I'm trying to say is that it's very easy to forget to sort of do that degree of background checks. I mean, some people might go to a site like Glassdoor or a review site to see, the response on there. But I think it is really interesting to sort of see how many people do fall victim to this stuff. And I think it really does go back to, if you do suspect something might be wrong, take some initiative and just contact the company first and foremost. Because at the end of the day, if you're concerned that you might be getting a fraudulent message trying to claim that you owe money for whatever reason from the lender, or someone impersonating a lender, I think the easiest thing is just to backtrack your steps a little bit and make sure you're getting in contact with the official number, I suppose, so that you're talking to someone legit. I know I've done that when I've had messages from my bank that I'm not sure about. In some cases, they have been legit, but and then in others they have been scams. So I'm quite happy that I've double checked it. But I mean, it's simple stuff like that I think probably a lot of people aren't doing. And like I said, just simply checking the FCA's website to make sure it is a proper registered lender. I mean, that's step one that I think probably a lot of people forget to do, and it's very simple. So, you know, if more attention and it, or if it was brought to more light, I think more people would do it.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why these kind of campaigns are so important, because I guess one of the biggest issues with these types of fraud is overconfidence. Like I even said earlier on in this podcast, like, I feel like I'm very good at spotting these types of scams. And I think it's that kind of overconfidence, like, oh, I know what I'm doing, I'm not going to be scammed, that actually ends up being the thing that catches a lot of people out, and they don't take these extra precautions. And that's why these types of campaigns, which are just trying to remind people to take those extra steps before they dive into anything finance related, really make sure, even if you're confident, make sure you're double checking. That's such an important thing. And I wonder if, if there was no overconfidence or strong belief, like I know tech, I know what I'm doing, I know frauds, that the numbers that people that get caught out by these types of the scams and fraud would be much less. So I think while education is important, it's also that reminder just to check yourself, check the company, and keep yourself safe first and foremost before you make any move. But Polly, I want to get your take on this situation as well.
You know what? I have never in my life thought to check the FCA website to see if like a financial product or like something I'm using is legit. Like I didn't even know that was a thing you could do. So egg on my face, I guess. I guess it's interesting because I've loan fee fraud isn't something that I've necessarily heard a lot about, but reading through the story, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that seems like a thing that we should be sort of concerned about, especially as it was saying, with the cost of living crisis and people struggling a little bit with their money. And but then I also kind of like you, Tom, with like your overconfidence. I never go for anything that I don't recognize. So if I'm ever like buying insurance, or like I took out a credit card earlier this year, or like a loan for my car when I bought that a couple of years ago, I only ever pick companies that I know. So I'll always go on like, I don't know, like Compare the Cat or Money Supermarket or something like that. And if I don't recognize the name of the financial company, I won't go with them. And I know that's not necessarily a good um, indicator of whether or not they're a good company, but if I've heard of them, then they must be somewhat okay. And that's my little way of determining who's safe and who isn't. Maybe I need a better way of doing it, but that seems to work for me, because then I only ever stick with like the big names. So this is really interesting that some people might go with the lesser known companies, but then I guess if you're really after a loan and you might be struggling, you probably just kind of go with what you can get. So if you find, someone's offering you like a really good rate, or like they don't, not too bothered about like your credit score or things like that, I can see why people would fall into the trap of just going with someone that they found, I don't know, maybe they've seen it advertised on Facebook or something like that. But I guess it's just another example, like we were saying with the previous story, of how like people just need to be aware and kind of be educated and have sort of to think about things. And if at any point it feels a bit dodgy or it feels a bit weird, then you need to sort of step back and take a look at it and sort of try and protect yourselves from these scams. But it's such a tricky one because you can't really, we always say on this podcast that everyone just needs to be, get better education around things, but it's hard to say you need to get better education around scams, because scams are so different and so, tricky, and it's such an interesting thing. So no, but that's what people need to do. They need to sort of think a little bit more and try and protect themselves, especially in the ways that the FCA have said to. So I guess, and hopefully it'll be okay.
No, I like the idea of your own personal register just in your head. Just if it's something you've heard of,
You know
that's the
what?
way
If
to
it's
go.
not Sainsbury's Bank or like Tesco or anything like that, I'm not buying it.
You
So
need to be checking it's not someone posing as Sainsbury's Bank or
I had to, because I always go through Money Supermarket, so it's all right. But I had to buy wedding insurance a couple of months ago, and I've never heard of any of these wedding insurance companies. So I'm like, no, this is a scam. This has to be. I don't know any of these people, especially with like the job that we have. Like usually, you know a bit more than like the regular person. But so that was a
Wouldn't
bit
it be
testy.
funny if you check the FCA's website now, and
Don't.
none
I'm
of them
actually
were on
going
there.
to. I'm actually going to, and it'll be an interesting moment for me when none of them are on that website to be like safe. There'll be like big red letters, like warning, don't buy from these companies. Anyway, moving on. Thank you guys for that. Is all of them, isn't it? One.
Nope,
No,
not quite.
God,
Not
got
quite
too
yet.
far ahead. Francis, you go. There was me just going to end the podcast before you'd even said anything.
The best, we're saving the best till last. That's what I'm telling myself. I mean, I was going to try and make a little, I guess, a pun to sort of say how they're not a pun, but like a link between mine and Tom's article and saying, oh, you know, they're both by the FCA, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. Just skipping over, I guess. My article today is on overseas payment fees in the UK and how the north of England and Scotland really seem to be affected by the extortionate fees that they're having to pay to really expand and go abroad. So I think it's fair to say expansion is never easy for any startup, but it's made all the more difficult when SMEs are faced with large international payment fees. So research from Wise, the money moving paytech, has revealed that SMEs in the north of England especially struggle with this as they spend roughly 414,000 on international payment fees, and notably firms in Leeds pay 6% above this. Wise surveyed 1,000 SMEs and to try and find the primary reason for them remaining national. 25% looked towards the exchange rate volatility, and a further 25% looked at the inconvenience of traditional banking services as reasons not to go overseas. The tough economic climate this past year, I'd say, has made it very difficult in a financial sector to really, expand and get a startup going. I mean, we're well aware, and people in the industry are well aware that this year has been a very difficult year for fintech funding. I mean, you look at, the last, I don't know, compare it to 2021, for example, and this sheer popularity of fintech compared to now, it's really, I don't want to say fallen off a cliff because I think that might be a little bit too dramatic, but it's definitely not where it was back then. So, in order for businesses to find themselves a more favorable environment for success, according to Wise, the government must do more. So regulations must be tightened to make fees clearer and the market more competitive. And in doing so, SMEs will have a greater awareness and be able to make more educated financial decisions on whether they want to expand, when expansion is a good idea, and ultimately where they want to expand to. So Wise has asked the FCA to better enforce CBPR rules and provide additional guidance to banks so their intentions to ban hidden fees rules is respected. They must ensure that as part of its PSR review, all payments overseas are subject to transparency, with banks forced to make fees clear. And lastly, they must end the corporate opt out, which penalizes SMBs for no good reason. So, I really wanted to get your guys' thoughts, really. And does it surprise you that it's the north of England that's really being impacted by these fees? And do you agree that the FCA and the government should really be doing more to help what is the backbone of the UK economy in startups to really, have better success expanding? Polly, I'll go to you first.
This one was an interesting one to me because reading through it, I was really sort of struck with the idea of why is it that the north of England and sort of further north are having these higher fees? Is it a case of just because they're far away from London, so the banks have to do more? I don't quite know how it works, but that was a really interesting point as to why these places are having higher fees. But I mean, cross-border payments and other sort of things like that have always been sort of a bit of a sticky point for a lot of banks and a lot of financial institutions. And it's something that we see coming up a lot and being an issue for like small businesses when they want to expand, or even like medium-sized businesses when they're trying to sort of continue their operations. The sending money abroad or payments abroad can be really, really difficult, and it can be, the fees can really impact the success and the potential for growth there. I think this CBPR rules are very interesting, and I hadn't heard of that before. So I think it's great that Wise is calling for the FCA to better enforce these rules and provide additional, guidance to the banks in terms of this, and banning hidden fees. I feel like we've had this conversation before about something on this podcast. Like, maybe it was even cross-border payments. I'm sure we've had this conversation for people calling to ban hidden fees, and again, it just feels like, why have we not done that yet? Like, why is that still a thing? Why are hidden fees still a thing? And you could say that for, everything in life, not necessarily just in this sort of situation and context we're talking about here now, but just generally in life and in like financial products and things like that. Why are hidden fees still allowed to be a thing? Because it does suck, and it is, it's just not great. And transparency is always going to be key. And, we talk a lot about sort of customer retention and customer loyalty and how customer demands inform a lot of different things. And having that transparency is so crucial and so key to that, their customer loyalty, their customer retention, that it doesn't make sense to me as to why you wouldn't do that. Like, unless I guess you're doing fine as you are. But I think it's going to come to a point where, some of these businesses that are offering these really sort of hidden fees or kind of the shady practices, not shady, maybe that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? They're kind of trying to take advantage of the situation. Hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll start to see them sort of decrease down, if they haven't changed their ways, because, customers, I think, are getting wise to that sort of thing, whether they're a business customer, like we're talking about in this article, or just like a general consumer. So yeah, I think it's really frustrating, I'm sure, for everyone involved, especially if you know that you've got more fees than the other people. Hopefully that with this, and the FCA can step in and really start to make things a little bit better, because I think especially with the situation they're in at the moment economically, having a little bit of a boost for small businesses, or any businesses for that matter, to keep going is going to be really crucial to sort of keeping our economy afloat, I guess, over the next few years.
Brilliant. Cheers, Polly. Tom, what do you think?
To me, this feels like a really familiar story about slow moving government and like regulatory action to a problem that's existed already for a long time. Like Polly said, this has been an issue for what feels like forever. To cross border payments has always been difficult in some way, whether it be through hidden fees or just being generally expensive, even if the fees aren't hidden. And it feels like the efforts that have come in so far, like the payment services regulation, kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they make a good start. But the fact there's like a corporate opt out means it's never going to successfully make a significant difference to the space if everyone isn't having to play by the same rules. So, if anything, that actually creates more uncertainty. So, it feels like a clear solution would be just that would help small and medium sized businesses to expand. It's just to tighten the rules and enforce existing ones more strictly. But as we know, government and regulatory practices are quite slow moving, especially in this kind of respect. And while wise make this call, I feel like we could still be waiting a very long time before anything is done practically to change these kind of regulations. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly we can get a response to this kind of thing when it clearly would help the economy by helping so many small and medium sized businesses.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the end of the day, that's the end goal, right? Is to help as many businesses as possible to really take off, because there isn't a world where that isn't a benefit. And there was something that I wanted to mention earlier that Polly mentioned. When we were talking about your article, Tom, Polly mentioned the idea of, when you're trying to get a loan, or when we're applying for lenders, I believe it's the idea of you've only got a limited amount of options available to you. And when we're talking about, why international payment fees are what they are and why banks can continue to get away with it, is because for some organizations, they simply can't, they don't have the access to other platforms and other ways to make this expansion possible without paying these fees. So in short, I think it really is a case of why haven't they been banned yet? I think we can all agree that it doesn't make sense that you can sort of tell someone, oh, we'll charge you this amount. As soon as they send the money, you're like, actually, we'll add on like another X amount. I think that's ridiculous. And yeah, so I think hopefully in the long term, this all helps the economy.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you guys. Now we are at the end. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for the discussion. If any of our listeners want to hear any more about the articles that we've spoken about today, or anything else from the fintech world, head on over to the Fintech Times website, and there's plenty more news and insights over there. So let's move on to what I learned this week. So each week, so much new news and information across our desks, being on the Fintech Times editorial team, that we are learning something new all the time. So Francis, what did you learn this week?
This week, I sat down with Allocentric, I believe it's called, a Chilean-based fintech, which is using AI communication and customer analytics to really improve, organizations' down in South America and expanding outwards. And I just thought it was really interesting to see how AI is really, taking off in the communication sector. But what I found even more interesting was, when we talk about organizations and just people in general, like communications, we always think about phones, but apparently those are increasingly being avoided in favor of things such as WhatsApp and Discord. So I found that very interesting.
Awesome. Tom, what did you learn this week?
This week, I'll give them another shout out that I've spoken about earlier. The global payments giant PayPal launched a US dollar backed stablecoin. And I think it'll be really interesting to find out more about how that does and how adopted it becomes in the future.
Amazing. And then me, I'm going to do an absolute cop out because this week I learned that you could search on the FCA for authorized and regulated companies, and I didn't know that you could do that. So we're all learning things today. Anyway, but guys, thank you so much once again for joining me on the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure. I missed you last week, so I'm glad to be back. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys next week.
See you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.